Welcome to Crafty Beach. This is Julie. I have some stylish skeletons for you today. But first, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, the bell to be notified when I post new videos, and a thumbs up is very much appreciated. Okay, guys, I got some of these cheap plastic skulls from the Dollar Tree, and I want to make them some stylish decor pieces for my house. First, I want to cut a hole in the top of the skull, so I'm just using a candle because it's a circle and it's about the right size, and I'm just drawing that on the top of my skull with a Sharpie so that I know where to cut. I want to make this skull into a planter, and so I'm just using a razor blade from the Dollar Tree and cutting that circle out carefully. Make sure you don't cut yourself. The front of the skull is really thin and easy to cut. The back of the skull is thicker, and so you kind of do have to work at it, but just kind of try to get like a little bit of a circle shape. It doesn't have to be perfect because you're not going to be able to really see it. And I want to make these into planters. I'm going to try this paint technique I've never used before. I'm using white acrylic paint and mixing that with baking powder. Now I'm using baking powder and not baking soda. It's going to give me a different effect. So there's kind of a chemical reaction and it gets all foamy and crazy looking, and that's what we're going for. Now, I have used baking soda paint before, and it gives you a really rough texture. I wanted a ceramic looking texture and wanted these to look like white ceramic skulls, and so that is what I'm going for, and I think it worked out really well. I didn't measure anything. I just mixed some in there until I got the consistency that I wanted, and I'm just using a chunky brush to paint my skull all over. You kind of need a brush because you kind of need to get into all the little nooks and crannies on the skull, and it did take, I think, 3 coats of paint to do that. Now you'll see I did the same thing with 2 more skulls, so I just cut a hole in them and painted them with a coat of this baking powder paint, and now I'm going in and putting a second coat of paint on all 3 of those, and I want to make those little planters for some flowers, actually some leaves. So that's kind of what it looks like with 2 coats. And then I did have to go in and do a 3rd coat on all of my skulls, and it gave me great coverage. Now, if you were to do this with white chalk paint, I think you would get a similar finish, but it might not look as ceramic, but it might. I didn't have any white chalk paint, so I tried to do this technique instead, but I probably need to pick some up. I usually use ivory. Now, this is the thrift flip sign that I got at the thrift store. It's the perfect size, and it's a heavy wood sign, and I thought it would be a perfect base for my skull planters. So I'm just cleaning that up, and then I'm just going to paint it white. I'm just using that white acrylic paint to paint it. It did take like 3 coats because the coverage isn't that great on that. I really do need to pick up some white chalk paint the next time I go to Walmart, I think. But this is going to be a nice heavy-duty base for my skulls. And again, you can use whatever you have or whatever you can find for this. But I think the base totally ups the project. I think it really helps it out. So then I am just filling my 3 little skulls with some floral foam from the Dollar Tree. Now, it's kind of got a big cavity in there, so I'm just putting chunks in there to try to fill it up to give me areas to poke my plants into because it's kind of hard to get it in there with just the small circle on top opening. And so just filling those up until they're pretty much full, and we can start doing our decorating here with our leaves. Now, these are the blue maple leaves from the Dollar Tree. I have used these before on a reef. I did the blue maple leaves with like white starfish and white sand dollars, and I loved the blue and white combination. It kind of inspired me for today's pieces. I kind of wanted some more of this look, this blue and white look. It's a little different than my normal coastal decor. It's kind of more of a nautical look, but it's very classy, and I love the blue and white together. Now these, I used two sprigs that had the pumpkins on there, the white pumpkins. They also had berries, and I didn't really like the berries, so I did cut those off. And I'm just kind of arranging these to be symmetrical. I did end up with an extra white pumpkin, and I did try it, but I decided I'd rather my pieces be symmetrical than have one that has two of the pumpkins. So I do kind of make them all exactly the same. And you can't really see like the opening. I'm kind of pushing them down to cover up the top of the opening. And here is our base. I'm just covering it with some of this wider burlap that I picked up at Walmart. But you can totally use the burlap ribbon from Dollar Tree and just use two of them and kind of slightly overlap them. And I'm just attaching those to the underside of the sign with some hot glue just to cover the base with the burlap. And I kind of like the feel that that gives me. Now I want it to look nautical, kind of coastal. So I'm using some of this rope from the Dollar Tree and attaching that to the front and the back of my base. And it's kind of wide, so I'm going to use 2 rows and kind of trying to evenly space those. When I get to the end, I just trim it off. I was going to wrap all the way around, but since I used the burlap on the sides, I didn't really find that I needed to. And so I'm just cutting a piece kind of just to size and then just gluing that down with hot glue. And that is going to be all there is for our base of our little skulls. I really love how this piece turned out. I think it's beautiful and it really has a classy feel. I really love it. So I kind of measure my board just to try to find the center so I know where to glue down my very first skull. And I just glue it down with some hot glue underneath like the chin part of the skull because that's kind of how these little plastic skulls from the Dollar Tree sit. And I glue all 3 down, and I love it. What do you guys think of this first DIY? So pretty. Okay, our second DIY today is going to be a skeleton hand reef. I picked up 8 of these plastic skeleton hands from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to paint them all white using the same technique, but I didn't have enough of the white acrylic paint to do all of these hands. So I'm just using some white house paint that I had sitting around and mixing that with the baking powder to kind of do the same technique painting on these. And just using a brush, I'm going to do, I think I had to do 2 coats on both sides of the hands. Now you'll see that they do have left and right, so I made sure when I bought these at the Dollar Tree that I got 4 lefts and 4 rights. So I could kind of put them together thumb to thumb, but you know, it probably doesn't really matter. You could probably do like all lefts or all rights. But just be aware that there are 2 different kinds, 2 different shapes. And I got the idea for this project. I think it was in a magazine. I saw somebody had made a reef with skeleton hands from the Dollar Tree. They kind of had theirs tucking under with like a happy Halloween sign in the middle. And it was super cute. And I'm not sure who the original creator was on that, but kudos to them. It inspired me to do this. I want mine to have like a different, like a feel, like a classier feel. So you'll see how I put this together. Now, if I were to do this project again and I did not live in Florida, where spray paint never dries, I would use like a matte white chalk paint or a matte white or a chalk paint spray paint and just spray these because it'd be so much faster because the painting did take me a while on those. Or white chalk paint would have probably been faster too. I might have got better coverage and not had to do several coats. Now I just used one of those wire reef forms that come in the 3-pack from the Dollar Tree and hot glued those together. And I didn't feel it was strong enough, so I'm just going around here with some rope and gluing that on around that ring. And I still didn't feel like it was super strong. So I think I end up doing the Reef Ring. Plus, I think I did 3 loops of the rope just so that I have multiple things glued to so that this reef stays together. I don't want it to fall apart. The different thing that I did is you'll see all the fingers are pointed down. So this is the back of my project. I'm going to have my fingers pointing out towards you. And it totally gives you a little bit different feel than the other way to make this reef. And if you didn't have the wire ring, you could always use like a reef form from the Dollar Tree and just glue the 3 like parts of the reef to the back of that. Now, I got one of these from the Target Dollar Spot. It's just a little reef ring. They're $3 at the Target Dollar Spot. And I really liked the vibe of this one. And I'm just tying that on to my reef with some twine, with a long piece of twine that can double as my hanger just by tying it off at the top. Then I also tie that to the bottom with some more twine to make sure it kind of lines up properly. But I think it's kind of surprising to have like this reef with the skeleton hands peeking out from behind it. Okay, it's time for our last project today. I want to make another one of these ceramic skulls. So I'm going to use the same technique for one of these plastic skulls from the Dollar Tree. And I'm going to cover it with some of that white acrylic paint mixed with a baking powder. I did like this technique. It did take lots of coats to cover, but it does definitely give you like a ceramic feel. But if you're short on time, I would just say use white chalk paint from Waverly. And then I got one of these candle holders from the Dollar Tree. I think this one was previously black maybe, and I painted it ivory. So now I'm giving it a coat of that white too, just to make it the same color as my skull. And then I'm going to attach my skull with some E6000, but mostly hot glue holds it down for right now. I did have some problem there. My hot glue gun was not ready. And I'm just gluing that down, and it is pretty secure. I hope it stays on there because I worked really hard on this project and I don't want it to fall apart. So I'm just touching up the paint a little bit there, and I wanted it to be like a textured, like beaded skull. So I'm using this diamond mesh wrap from the Dollar Tree, and it does happen to be blue. It is like a light blue stone. And it's not really the vibe I'm going for this project, but I think I can make it work. Now, I started with just one strand. I'm just cutting them into strands. And be careful to make sure that you leave the adhesive on the back of it so that you can use that to stick it down. And I went down kind of in between the nose, and then I'm doing one strip at a time until I get to an area of like the eyebrow area that was straighter, and then I could use like 3, and then I kind of moved to 2. You can kind of see how many rows you can do, and this stuff is kind of flexible, so when you're working around like the curved surfaces of the skull, you can kind of bend it as you place it down, and it'll make it line up properly. And I'm just kind of doing as far as it goes in the back. You can't really see underside of it too well to make sure it's all level, but I do go in and try to fill up any holes. And I'm just doing it kind of like a skull cap. I'm not going to do the face. When I get to the side, I just kind of have to be creative. And I just start using that diamond mesh and trying to cut it to size and attaching that to my skull. And there's all kinds of like odd openings here. So I just kind of have to work like either one little diamond or strip at a time until I get pretty good coverage here on the side of my skull. I was trying to find something that I could do to make it like textured. I really want this to look like a ceramic white skull, but I want it to be like very decorative, like a statue. So just filling in all of the white areas like on the skull cap with those diamond mesh, and that took me about 30 minutes to cover all of that. I thought about doing the face, and then I was like, nah. But I don't like the light blue stones. I want it to be more of a match with those blue leaves. And so I'm just mixing together some different colors of chalk paint. I used ocean and peacock and ink to give me like a dark blue, like navy chalk paint. And then I'm just using a foam brush and kind of going all over to kind of paint all of those little stones to kind of make them more of a matte, not so shiny, and the right color of blue to go with today's projects. Now, sometimes I'm just trying to get the stones, but sometimes it does go through on the scalp, but that's okay. And then underneath, I wanted to attach some of those blue leaves. And so I am just tying those on underneath the candle holder with a piece of twine and kind of sticking the little sticks of the leaves down inside there. I did touch up the paint and I kept getting it on my leaves, but I was able to wipe that off and just tying that to the base and leaving like a little bit of the exposed rope. And I love how this project turned out. Now, I thought I needed a little something extra, so I'm using some of these wood beads from the Dollar Tree, and I just cut off a strand that I think will go around the base of the candle holder. And I just tie this on simply to the back. I don't even hot glue it because it's kind of stuck where I need it to be. But if yours is kind of moving around, you can totally do that. If you can't find that wood bead at the Dollar Tree, I know it's so hard to find. I've only found it once. You could always make a wood bead garland. Easy peasy. Now, I also wanted to distress this piece a little bit. So I am going over all the areas that I painted with that navy chalk paint that we made with some ivory, a chalk paint, and a chunky brush, and kind of distressing it to give it more of a nuanced vibe. Sometimes you can see some of the little blue stones through. Some are navy, some are like light blue with a combination of the blue and the white. Some are white, and it really brought out the cool texture on the top of my skull, and I really love how this piece turned out. It's so different and so pretty. Okay, final reveal time. Here's our 3 faux ceramic skulls using items from the Dollar Tree with our blue maple leaves in the top with some white pumpkins. And I really love the vibe on these. I hope you like them as well. Aren't they pretty? I love the blue and the white together, and I feel it looks really kind of nautical, but very classy at the same time. And then our second project we did was the skeleton hands reef, which was a surprising little reef with some skeleton hands peeking out on the sides. Just a very subtle, classy Halloween decoration. I think it's so cute. What do you think about this combination? And then our third project we did today was our little skull that we beaded. So this is another ceramic skull using the plastic skull from the Dollar Tree. We put it on a candlestick base. We beaded the entire top of the skull with these little diamond mesh from the Dollar Tree. Painted them, added wood beads and some blue leaves as well to kind of tie it into the other project. And it's so pretty. I love how that turned out. That's how it looks next to our little flower piece. And I just love these projects. Which project today was your favorite project? Please comment below. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't. Until next time, everyone, happy crafting. Bye.